I've been playing a whole bunch of SETI recently. That's Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, if you're curious. Not Seth, as the box might suggest if you squint your eyes just a little bit. It's a colossal, table-spanning game that has you and your friends embark on a quest to find aliens. And I would love to tell you all about it. Over 5 rounds, you and up to 3 more of your very best friends are subjected to a brain-burning puzzle for several hours, where you'll be jetting off into space, landing on planets, powering up a big fancy computer, and milling through dozens of entirely unique cards. But despite doing all of that, turns are actually weirdly straightforward. You'll choose an option from this delightful menu of what you might want to do on your turn. And a quick side note here, this is probably one of the best compact rules references I've seen in a board game in a hot minute. It's basically all of the rules. How'd they get it so small? So, here are the actions, in brief. Launch a probe and fly it around space. Space that, just like the real thing, rotates. On just one flat plane, though, of course. Scientists do not write in. I've graduated from flat Earth theory to flat space theory. It'll be a thing in like 5 years, I promise. Maybe you'll take an action to land that probe on a planet, or put it in orbit as a satellite to get all kinds of sparky bonuses, sometimes in the form of these orange bits of evidence of alien life. Maybe you'll choose to spend your turn scanning, taking part in an area control minigame where you compete directly with other players for purple bits of evidence of alien life. All of this is likely to get you some of these squat blue lozenges of data, which you plug into this computer to earn bonuses, ultimately spending a turn to crunch it all down into blue bits of evidence of alien life. These actions are all circuitous routes to resources and ultimately points, but that evidence of alien life, it serves an important purpose. Collaboratively collect all 3 kinds and wham! Aliens? Who could have seen that coming? They've been discovered for everyone round the table and you have to deal with that now. There are 5 unique aliens in the box, and setup for the game instructs you to put just 2 of them into play, but also not to look at them before you start the game. And so their arrival is something of a surprise, introducing a whole new stack of cards, a whole new set of components, a whole new minigame that everyone is going to partake in for the rest of this session. And the 2 of them together are going to combine into all kinds of unusual game states. I'm not going to spoil these right here, but I will go into more detail about the specific implications of these aliens later on in the video for folks who want to know more about them. But suffice to say, on your first few games, this stuff is tremendously exciting. What's out there? How's it going to contort this game right now? And most importantly, will all of this stay quite as exciting on repeat plays? Not really, no. In the writing business, we call that a subtle foreshadowing. Let's linger on the fun stuff for a minute though, because there's a huge amount of it to get into, and I don't want this review entirely coloured by quibbles. It's a good game. First up, this absolutely massive deck is full of exciting cards that can represent anything from sparkly opportunities to total junk. These cards give you souped up versions of existing actions by paying the costs associated, one-time bonuses that are huge and impactful, but they also offer you these little side missions that will dispense little treats when pursued en route to something bigger. I'll start by playing this messenger probe card that'll give me a launch and a movement, wanting me to stop off at Mercury. And then look, the Mariner 10 mission also wants me to stop at Mercury. And look which 2 planets are perfectly aligned this turn, a great opportunity for a Saturn flyby. And the 6 points gained from that nudge me above 50, which completes my quantum computer and lets me tuck this card to gain some energy. I'm so good. When a game sets out to be a big point salad euro that builds to this endless fountain of points and combos like a fruit machine that's lost the point and needs to calm down a bit, it's the little stuff like this that really gets it moving, that helps it along, and it's executed really well in this game. The thing is, even if a card might appear completely useless to you right now, it's no bother at all. Even when SETI's cards are effectively dead in the hand, they're not. They're offering you even more opportunities to pop off large style. Oh my goodness, these cards are so multi-use. Pitch them into the bin for their bonuses at the top, discard a pair of them for a money or an energy that might get you out of a pinch. You might even hold a useless card in hand because they can be used to scan certain sectors in space and help you in the area control minigame. Or maybe you want to save them and tuck them for income. Goodness, that's so many uses on a multi-use card. Somebody, please stop them. Though, having said all of that, the start of this game is not a huge combo-tastic crunch fest. It's a real bog. In a good way. You've got so little money, so few opportunities, and so much to do at the start of SETI. It's initially incredibly restrictive, but as the game progresses, it all pops open. Cash starts flowing, turns stretch longer and longer and longer. The first few rounds are the laning phase of the 3-hour Euro game, the space in which you get to feel the contrast of lacking against the everything you're gonna have later on. And let's get into the aliens, shall we? They'll each introduce a weird wrinkle to the game, layering in new cards and scoring opportunities. But also, their introduction does sneaky things to the rest of the box. When an alien prioritizes landing on planets, suddenly cards with effects to that end are much more valuable to everyone. When both aliens make immediate stacks of points alluring, there's a real rush for those high-value spaces above the slower rewards that might be found elsewhere. And they're really thematically enjoyable as well. Skip to this timestamp if you want to go in completely blind here, but I will say none of these are completely crazy, both in their theme and mechanics, so don't worry too much about big spoilers. Our first alien was Ooh Mama Mama. It's literally just a rock, but it's got fossils on it, and it clips onto the board, ooh, like that. Very satisfying. Landing probes and interacting with said rock gets you these little fossils, and you can chuck a bunch of them into the bin to claim high-value spaces on their little rewards track. Simple, straightforward, and very exciting. Thematically though, our favourites were these aliens that are so far away that all you can do is transmit a signal to them that gets bounced back. Thing is, it takes a bloody long time for those signals to get there. And so whenever you play one of their cards, yes, you get a reward right now, but then you place a little token 15 points ahead of where you are on the score track. You get the second part of that reward when you meet that little marker. Delightful, both in its theme and in its gameplay implications, where Matt stockpiled a bunch of them on the same specific space and then cashed them all in at exactly the same time. There's a species of bugs that you need to transport from planet to planet with your probes. There's an ancient civilization whose demise was so messed up and strange that a player collecting their cards runs the risk of losing 1/10 of their total points. And there's also this blue space egg that I don't care for. The thing is, I like that these aliens aren't too strange. I like that they're quite grounded. I like that they're not little grey men with fingers that go, ew. All of the cards in SETI's deck are based off of real-world science stuff, either things that actually exist now or might soon exist in the future. Whereas the alien cards, obviously, are fictitious, but they still are formatted in exactly the same way, and they still have flavour text at the bottom. But this time, that flavour text is a little bit weirder, a little more characterful. I like it a lot. It's not too crazy. It's grounded and it's fun. But this is where I might stall my excitement for what this game could be and spend some time relaying what it actually is. To caveat, I do think CGE have done a good job of reining in the weirdo design tendencies that have been a hallmark of the studio, and sometimes will create boxes that might be a little too odd, often pottering over into Gimmick Town. Now, SETI categorically does not feel like a gimmick game. These aliens are not a novelty that you see once and then chuck away afterwards. They're not too wacky that the game completely flies off the rails, but they're not too understated and dull that they become boring. But ultimately, I think my problems with the game are actually in the safety of the design around them. Even with the aliens and their changes, I've found that it's not particularly challenging to score respectably in SETI. That by the end of each subsequent game, I kind of feel like I've explored as much as I need to in this particular set of systems. The aliens in SETI serve to introduce replayability and strategic tweaks to the game, much like randomized setup might do in any other Eurogame. They're just a flashier and more exciting way of presenting that information. But I think that then they contrast with the brass tacks of the game you're playing. Brass tacks that might not be as interactive, exciting, or packed with personality as in other similar Eurogames. Now, it really is silly that I'm finding even more ways to talk about arcs in totally unrelated videos. I'm sorry, I have a problem. But the thing that kept me coming back over and over and over again to that particular game was that each session did not so much suggest a return, but demand it. Every time I played that game, despite no new reveals being added to the mix, I found myself finding new detail and excitement in the very basics. And SETI doesn't give me that energy to return because I find its basics to be a little middling. The goals I've pursued in each of my games have been differentiated by their microscopic efficiencies and opportunities. There's a dopamine hit to returning and replaying and chasing those higher scores and more exciting efficiencies, but fundamentally, I'm not evolving much in how I approach the puzzle. What this ultimately leads to is that the moment-to-moment of SETI is very similar and safe. Even with different aliens at play, you're still probing, scanning, computing, with tepid interactions and repetitive consequences. And initially, I really enjoyed not knowing what aliens were going to be in the game. It adds this anticipation and mystery. But the more I played SETI, the more I realized that this specific way of including them leads to a quite safe and staid early game. So the different aliens will prioritize which parts of the game are more rewarding. Some of them are great if you spec hard into being able to move your probes around quickly. Some of them are great if you've built a really good engine for getting energy. But because you're not to know what these aliens are, the game is measuring how good you are at adapting. And that's cool. I like a tactical game as much as I like a strategic one. But I think that it means those first few turns are just sort of set up before the reveal. And the setup that you're doing doesn't want to spec too hard into one area so as to afford the whitest canvas to paint on for the rest of the game, if that metaphor makes sense. I've also started to see some problems with how the game changes, or rather doesn't, at different player counts. At 2 players, SETI is barbed and readable. It's easy to find these tiny little legs up on your opponent and find ways to mess with your plans. It all feels very intentional, and also it's surprisingly pacey for a game of its size. But at higher player counts, it all gets tremendously soupy, a little too much for my tastes. So much of that is to do with the rotating board in the center. It moves when people research tech or when someone passes for the round. And that initially seems to be something you can predict. You can clearly see exactly when someone can afford research, and you can anticipate a pass based on the resources in front of a player. But that's not taking into account that these cards will also quite often rotate the board too. That's not so frustrating in a 2-player game. It doesn't happen that often. It's a spike of unpredictability. But in a larger player count game, this board can rotate a huge amount between one of your turns and the next. The thing is, I wouldn't mind this so much if rotating the board was something you engaged in intentionally, but often it just happens as a result of people playing the game. Your plans thrown entirely into disarray by someone just taking their turn, not thinking about you at all. And that's maybe my least favorite kind of Eurogame interaction. Make it intentional, make it personal. And all of this is to say that I do not think that SETI is a bad game at all. I really enjoyed my time playing SETI. I enjoyed unpicking it over multiple sessions. I just don't think it's going to stick around in my collection against other games that are simply more flavorful, more peppy, a more unique and exciting prospect to show people at my table. And so, what should you go out and buy if you like the idea of SETI but think it might not be quite the right game for you? Arc Nova is still a very good time, and great on Board Game Arena if you want to try it out. It's also a game of big cards and big combos, but I love the personality that you get and what you're building, and I like the core action mechanic a hell of a lot. That little conveyor belt of cards, ooh, it's juicy. If the themes of discovery, of scanning for something that's out there, is appealing to you, then the Search For series, Search for Planet X, Search for Lost Species, and soon the Search for UFOs, hey, they're all good options that fit in that theme of uncovering something hidden, but with a lot less of the Eurogame trappings. And finally, if this rotatey section of board is appealing to you, if you like orbits and hurling around in space, then I might suggest the game Sol: Last Days of a Star. Considerably bleaker and considerably weirder, that's a game you can hear us talk about on the Shut Up and Sit Down podcast, where we directly compared it to SETI. A very different kind of game, but maybe one to look for if you're not in the market for big combo Euros and want to play something a little more abstract and strange. And finally, a little question. Do you want to hear about the games that Shut Up and Sit Down is going to review before we review them? Supporting the show via our website or Patreon gets you access to the Shut Up and Sit Down newsletter, where, among other things, we talk about games that we might be reviewing or not reviewing very soon. A little bit of a sneak peek into things that are coming up soon lets you get ahead of the curve and feel extra special. Thanks for watching, everyone. See you again very soon. Bye-bye.